is such a pleasure to be joining you right here on the India Development Debate on ET Now. I'm Supriya Shrinate, and straight on to the big story that we are tracking on top of the hour this evening. After demonetisation and GST, the Modi government is ready with the next big bang reform initiative, it seems. On the cards is a major overhaul of the custom duty architecture. The fulcrum of the Rejig is seamless, faceless clearances for the movement of goods across ports. For example, a trader in Mumbai will be able to get his cargo assessed in Chennai without any interaction with the local customs official. Experts suggest that this could bring down corruption to a considerable level. Initially, such facilities will be extended to trusted traders handling low-risk commodities. In the second stage, the Customs Department's IT systems will be integrated with the portals of ports across the country. For traders, goods getting stuck at ports is a nightmare, as any delay in movement of the cargo could lead to huge process delays. Also, the much-needed revamp will help India break into the first 50 rankings in the ease of doing business. The big-ticket reform on the indirect tax front is exactly what we're debating right here on the India Development Debate this evening. Let me take this across to an expert panel that's joining us right here. Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador and former permanent representative of India to the WTO. Najib Shah, former chairman CBEC. Rupa Chanda, the RBI chair professor in economics, IIM Bangalore, and former economist IMF. Uday Pimprekar, tax partner, EY India. Thank you very much, each one of you, for joining us. And Professor Rupa Chanda, if I may begin with you, how significant will this rejig of the custom duty structure be after the GST? Many people believe this is a big bang reform. This could be game-changing. What's your take?
Yeah, I would say that it is a very important step forward. It's a continuation, I would say, of many of the trade facilitation related initiatives that have been happening over the last few years, especially since 2016. So, if you look at the time it takes to export or import, or the cost in terms of border compliance or documentary compliance, India has never really done very well. And in the last year especially, the improvement that we've seen in the doing business indicators has really come from a few parameters, and one of those being trade across borders. So this certainly is a step in the same direction, I would say. And if you actually look at those indices, what you find is that the border compliance, the documentary compliance, those sorts of things are what have been really setting India apart to a large extent from the other markets. The distance to frontier sort of indicators that are there of OECD, etc., actually show that India is much below what the best practices are. So this certainly would be a step in the right direction. And if you dig deeper, you look at things like, informal payments, fees and charges, too many, interactions, etc. So these are really a step in that direction. So I think it's a big game changer. But having said that, you see, there are other aspects. This is what is going to happen at the ports, but then to get the stuff from one port to another, from one city to another, that still requires logistics. So for me, logistics efficiency is actually key to getting this to be a success. So inland connectivity, the problems interstate, the problems with urban local bodies, the basic infrastructure and so on of transport, inland roads, railways, etc., that has to be simultaneously addressed. To some extent, some of the infrastructure development projects will of course help in that direction, but I still think logistics is a key issue. The other is of course also that if you want this sort of automated clearance, then you need certain legislative changes, because today you do have e-filing, you do have e-submission of documents, but then customs officials often at their discretion ask for physical documentation. So a lot of other complementary things have to happen for this to be that sort of game changer. Mindset changes, the discretion needs to go down, etc.
Okay, just give me that minute. Give me a minute now, because I want to take this across to Najib Jung as well, and Jayant Dasgupta, who's joining us. If I may come to you, Jayant Dasgupta, first, is this a big factor that will boost ease of doing business? I mean, is this a factor that is really going to speed up trade? Because, our trading across borders is maybe we're 146, we've leapfrogged to, I think, at 80. Is this going to be something that's going to speed up our trade standalone? Or, I mean, of course, there will be many surrounding things that will have to come together, like Professor Rupa Chanda points out. But is this going to be a significant factor that's going to move the needle?
I think it would be a very welcome step in the right direction, This is an incremental change in cleaning up our procedures, in reforming our procedures, because the root of the problems at the customs posts are is the the physical documents, demand for physical documents and then checking, and that leads to delays, that leads to corruption, and that leads to a lot of dissatisfaction amongst the exporters and importers. So, that is something which is going to get addressed. It took a long time in coming, and this is of a piece with what the WTO has been doing in terms of the trade facilitation agreement and the sensitization towards the problems faced by importers and exporters around the globe. And of course, India has still to catch up with the best practices in most of the advanced countries. So, this is just a step in the right direction. It is very welcome, but I do not think it is going to be very significant unless, as Professor Chanda has pointed out, the land side infrastructure, which has a huge bearing on the transaction costs and the time taken for sending consignments from the hinterland to the ports for onward transmission, or for inbound cargo to be cleared at the customs and then head to the hinterland. That is where we also need to put in a lot of effort, and that of course is something which the government has been trying to do. But just by taking steps to clean up the clearance procedures at the customs level will not be very significant. So, it is a step in the right direction, very welcome.
Fair point.
It will be beneficial for the importers and the exporters, because there is something which I read, and that is that e-Sanchit scheme, which is already in force for all the documentation.
Mr. Dasgupta, let me come back to you. Mr. Dasgupta, let me come back to you. I'm trying to get opening comments from everybody. Mr. Dasgupta, give me a minute, I will come back to you. Let me just get opening comments from everybody. Najib Shah, the proposed changes are all centered around the fact that it seeks to introduce faceless interface. Pardon me for what I'm going to say next, but is the assumption and acceptance here of the fact that face-to-face interaction has so far bred corruption and has encouraged rent seeking? Is there finally acceptance of the fact that faceless interface is required to just cut down and wipe out all the rent seeking that has happened so far?
No, I think it's very important that we put things in perspective. Currently, almost 80% of every single transaction, or rather I must stand corrected, it is 98% of all transactions are on the EDI. We have more than 134 locations, all of which are on EDI, number one. Number two, even today, I can file my documents for import or export from anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, in fact. It is also faceless and nameless largely. It is only a very small percentage of transactions which require some physical examination either of the documents or of the goods. And this percentage is very small. We have a very robust risk management system which addresses issues of risks and throws up possible risks based on which the officers are able to decide that this particular consignment requires a closer check. So, what we are now talking of, what the CBIC is now proposing is in effect to remove this geographical limitations. So, as the chairman has mentioned today, in effect it means that a consignment of Nhava Sheva can be assessed and cleared from Chennai. Now, even today there is some degree of specialization. Every custom house has what is known as groups, whereby commodities are clustered in one group. So, for instance, if it's chemicals, it will go to a particular group. If it is machinery, it will go to a particular group. So, there is a degree of specialization. We are expanding this only to have not just greater utilization of the EDI system, but also greater utilization of the manpower. For instance, Nhava Sheva obviously is by far the largest port in the country, which has more than 40, 45, 50% of the entire imports coming in there. And the workforce there is hard pressed. Now, we could spread the work amongst various other customs locations where there is also the similar degree of specialization. So, I do believe that this is a step not just for ensuring speedier clearance, but also better utilization of the workforce within the customs administration. It is very important to realize that we already have a robust EDI system currently in place.
Okay, so it isn't as if it's going to be, something that's going to be done out of the blue. There are things there, perhaps there'll be improvisation. But Uday Pimprekar, some of the things that Rejig Jung spoke about are relevant to be spoken about here. There is this constant debate that why can shipment of one category in one location not be assessed in the other? Why is it that one category, the reduction in time and all of that? How do you think this is going to impact businesses that you deal with? I'm sure there are a lot of exporters and importers that you deal with. This whole aspect of, shipments, say in Mumbai, being assessed by a port in Chennai or otherwise, where like Mr. Jung said, there is a manpower constraint in, say, Mumbai, and this could be perhaps dealt with at another port. How is this going to really help? I mean, can you give me a sort of a framework on what time reductions will this entail?
So, one is of course the entire issue related to the reduction in time and ease in doing business on one aspect, and the other aspect that Mr. Shah was also mentioning about better working or better alignment of working from the department side. I think what's being embarked upon, I think, addresses a bit of both. And as Mr. Shah mentioned earlier, I think this is not entirely started now. This has been a journey over the last few years, and I think the government has done tremendously well on this count, primarily because the ICE gate system or the EDI system, as was being mentioned earlier, covers bulk of the imports. The RMS system is also fairly robust, and it is kept on getting improved. It is also related to the other, so to speak, digitization process, if I can call it that, of the government on the GST side and the compliance related to that. And now when this entire ecosystem of digitalization is coming, obviously is going to help both the government and the businesses. As we speak, I mean, there are other programs that are being put in place, which is the AEO, whereby faster clearances are being allowed from a customs perspective. And so what happens right now, as was being suggested, was that any bill of entry that is getting filed gets filed through the platform that the government has. I mean, that bill of entry goes through the RMS system. Only identified samples that are projected by the RMS system are physically checked, and so bulk of it is anyway getting moved seamlessly. Now, what is being thought of is, I guess, the next phase, wherein even the assessments that are being done will be done by specialized groups. And that, I think, is a very significant development even from the customs side and also for the businesses. The customs side, it is important because now you will have specialized groups which understand the relevant products and so on and so forth, assessing those relevant products, and therefore there is a large amount of consistency that builds upon. Even from a business's side, the businesses need to realize that they need to be appropriate now. I mean, earlier there were several instances where classification was being done in one case, in one port differently than what it was being done in another port. And these kind of inconsistencies remain then kind of
give me a minute. Uday, I'm
now,
sorry, I'm going to interview you
forward,
there. Uday,
sure.
Yeah. Uday, give me a minute. I think you're making an important point. If I can pull in Professor Rupa Chanda on this. And Professor Chanda, the point that Uday Pimprekar is making, it is not just about the government being ready with an infrastructure and all of that. Whether it is e-traceability, whether it is automated release of goods and all of that. As far as shipments is concerned, industry needs to be ready as well. And some of the things that, have to be put in order within the house. How ready are Indian businesses for something like this to kind of meaningfully take off?
I think you have to really see it in terms of two classes of businesses. So I think as far as the bigger businesses are concerned, probably they are quite ready with IT platforms, though one hears that, you know, in terms of templates or formats or the software that is used, that sometimes there isn't compatibility. This is at least what I've heard in Bangalore from when I interviewed various industries. But as far as MSMEs are concerned, certainly they would not be prepared. And I think the issues they face in terms of, you know, freight forwarders or choosing shipping lines or, you know, stations and so on, that problem will still remain. So I think you have to, in India, always look at preparedness in terms of the small and medium industries versus the large industries. But I would like to address the question that was, you know, the issue that was raised earlier, which is about deployment and expertise. I think in that sense it is very important because you know, as new products are also coming in, their classification becomes very important. So this way, by dedicating certain ports where certain products would be coming in, not only are you mapping, you need to map the trade patterns better with where, you know, you're doing the assessments, but it would also help in terms of upgrading skill sets and expertise. And domain knowledge is extremely important in today's technology intensive sort of trade. In fact, I would go a step further. The government needs to think of setting up virtual centers where this sort of domain knowledge and so on is available 24/7, so that from any port you can actually tap in and get this expertise and have the right classification, because this issue of, you know, differential classification across ports has existed and has been a big problem for traders.
I think that's an important point that you're talking about, that domain knowledge is going to be important, and, you know, it will help us map trading patterns. But Jayant Dasgupta, I want you to come in on that. You know, there are always going to be two categories of businesses, like Professor Chanda pointed out. This was the case even in GST. The larger businesses were prepared for a rollout, the smaller ones were struggling. I'm presuming the same will be true for the custom infrastructure, you know, duty infrastructure as well. My question to you is, in terms of expertise required, in terms of domain knowledge required, what is it that the government needs to do right away? I mean, there are some best practices to be tracked down from across the world, but like in IBC or like in NCLT, we did not have resolution professionals. You know, that ecosystem developed once it was introduced. Can we afford something similar here?
I think in the context of customs clearances, this step of letting, you know, particular customs officers specialize in certain product groups, that is very welcome. That will in fact lead to a great deal of consistency and you know, expeditious clearances. But what also needs to be done is that we need to amend the Customs Act. Of course, I think the bill is under, you know, to my knowledge, it was at an advanced stage. It is about the Advanced Rulings Authority. You know, in the till a few years ago, an advanced ruling from the authority would only be applicable to the same commissionerate and for the same you know, applicant. It would not be applicable in terms of classification in another commissionerate and if filed by another applicant. So that is the kind of thing which we need to absolutely, you know, deal with and reform, and this is part of the best practices which we need to adopt. This is also part of the trade facilitation agreement, and I am sure the government will bring in this kind of an overall you know, judicial review system, which will enable, you know, importers and people who are wanting to set up a business from abroad to get to know what exactly is the duty incidence and to have certainty and predictability. You know, each commissionerate having a separate ruling and a separate kind of a structure for classifying goods, that is not good. So this is moving in the right direction, and specialization at the customs house level, different customs offices, that will indeed help very much. And I agree with Rupa's analysis that MSMEs need to you know, be sensitized, need to be trained, and in that sense the freight forwarders, the customs house agents, in many cases, especially when in relation to exports, they you know, do not pay enough attention to classifying the products that are getting exported properly, which leads to a great deal of confusion and also problems in collection of data and disbursal of benefits you know, to the exporters later on.
Right, right. Fair point. But Najib Shah, just want to get one question out of the way. For a change like this to happen, and you in your opening remarks said that there are systems that are already in place, do we then need at all any changes in the legal or statutory laws? I mean, will any of that be required? And obviously, one more question is, how will this really aid exports? Is this going to make a vast difference to just how we import, or is this going to have some sort of a ripple effect on exports as well? Just from a layman's point of view, if you can explain that to me.
There will be some statutory changes required to the extent of giving jurisdiction of a particular officer stationed in Chennai, for instance, over the imports which come from Calcutta or Delhi or Nhava Sheva. As of now, such jurisdiction is limited to the respective custom houses. So there would be, and that is quite easily done. It's done through a notification of the Government of India. So that will be a necessary change on the legal side. You see, I must just make mention of what the professor had mentioned about this distinction between the major players and the MSME sectors. In the customs ecosystem as it stands today, 98% of all our imports are through the EDA system, and that includes also the MSME sector. We have service centers in each one of these custom houses, where in case they don't have facilities for filing it through the EDI, they can very well use the services provided in respective custom houses to file it online. And that has been working tremendously for the smaller sector. Now, you also asked me how it will facilitate and help imports and exports. The mention has been made about the specialization and ensuring consistency in classification. Yes, this has been a bit of a problem in terms of classification differing across custom houses, sometimes in some products. But by and large, the board has stepped in wherever such differences take place and issued clarifications which are binding on all the officers. What will happen now is that there will be better utilization of the workforce. I can't emphasize this enough, because very many times the delay also occurs because of the sheer pressure of work in a particular custom house for particular products where some degree of specialization has taken place, or because of the market is closer to that particular areas of imports. So this would mean that there will be speedier clearances of imports. As regards exports, yes, I would assume that the same practice will be there on exports. The newspaper report of today doesn't make too much of mention regarding exports, but I suppose this will be a step in the same direction, and that would mean speedier disbursement of benefits like drawback and the schemes run by the Department of Commerce, the DGFT. So I guess that's what will happen. But I think this is a step which is a natural progression of the EDI system which the Customs Administration has put in place since late 90s, and it has been extremely robust now and has more than
all right. Sir, I'm sorry, you'll have to indulge me. I've got very little time on the show, and if I can go to I'll have to go to Uday Pimprikar. Just give me a minute. Uday, is the change in custom duty architecture, which is much warranted, much appreciated, at variance with the multiple rounds of hikes in import duties announced recently? It almost seems to be, you know, we are talking of the same thing, of the same ecosystem at two complete variants. There is, you know, we are raising trade barriers by import duty hikes seemingly, but we are talking about making it ease of doing business by rejigging and restructuring the whole architecture. If you can make your answer brief, I'll cover one more question.
So, okay, let me just, I mean, these two are, I guess, different baskets. One policy deals with having an adequate trade barrier from a domestic industry perspective, especially on the imports front. And the government has been using that policy for, one, increasing the trade barrier, also very, very effectively trying to kind of infuse investment into India, the way they have gone about handling the customs duty elements in relation to incentivizing manufacturing on the telecom sector and some of the other sectors that they have gone ahead and done. So that's one policy of the government. The second policy is a generic policy whereby compliant importers or exporters are able to conduct their businesses adequately and easily with some amount of certainty and consistency across the country. And this has been a continuous effort from the government, not only now, but from the last 15-20 years. Of course, it has gained significant amount of pace over the last 4-5 years. This is the last phase of, or the next phase, I would say, of an activity which will make customs assessments more effective, customs functioning more effective, as also possibly you allow people to import much faster and so on and so forth. So I think this is a continuous process and it will carry on.
Uday, I'll have to come in there. Yeah, Uday, I'll have to come in there. And Professor Rupa Chanda, please make this brief. Is there also a case for rethinking some FTAs? I mean, some of these FTAs have been misused. We clearly rushed into many of them to begin with. I'm not going to ask you the inverted duty structure because the government perhaps needs to go the whole hog. They've started off with this budget. But as far as the FTAs are concerned, is it time that India rethinks and reviews some of its existing free trade agreements?
Okay, so first let me say that, if you look at the data on utilization of FTAs for many categories of products, it's pretty low. And that may be because of the compliance issues with rules of origin, certificates, and so on. Yes, there is a need for rethink, because I think we expected to gain a lot in certain sectors and we haven't. And that's again to do with the trade enabling environment. So actually the steps that we are talking about now would be complementary to signing FTAs. If you really want to get market access, well, you have to improve the domestic environment for trade, both importing and exporting. So in that sense, actually it's the step in the right direction, even to complement FTAs. But whether we should revisit FTAs, how we strategize on FTAs and so on, is a separate question, I would say. That we have already entered them, so I don't think we can talk about retracting. We are getting into RCEP for next year.
We can talk about
we need to do all the domestic reforms necessary to take as much advantage of whatever we are signing. Yes. Right.
Okay. I think I've completely run out of time here, but it's been a very erudite discussion as far as the custom duty architecture change is concerned. I think many people will point us in the direction that IT systems at ports need to be in sync with what is being proposed. Some kind of streamlining of infrastructure will be required, but it is a step in the right direction and one that should improve our ease of doing business. Of course, domestic conditions will have to be made better as well, both for imports as well as exports. Thank you very much, Najib Shah, Professor Rupa Chanda, Uday Pimprikar, and of course Jayant Das Gupta. Thanks very much for being with us. We take a quick breather. We'll be back with plenty more right here on ET Now.